Everyone was rejoicing that the long-awaited wedding day had finally arrived. My lord would indeed marry such a stunning girl. But even though it was time for the wedding, there was still no groom, and the bride was all alone, and everyone felt sorry for her, as my lord had been absent since the beginning of the ceremony. Absolutely all incomprehensible looks were directed at the bewildered girl, and from this, she wanted to hide far away just not to see them. Once upon a time, Marquis had a daughter, a girl like a pink cotton candy, who grew up in the love of her parents. Maybe it was because the baby was so cute that her character took on a confused and surly demeanor. Experiencing difficulties even from ordinary conversations with people, the girl preferred to read in the company of noble ladies or attend tea ceremonies. Parents worried about their daughter sometimes overstepping personal boundaries and ridiculing her weaknesses. But the day of the dance ball came, which was also the debut of the girl, and therefore not to appear at the celebration. She could not. At the time of arrival at the ball, Lady was in tears, because right in front of her was Avelina. Avelina is the heroine of the novel The Betrayal of the Black Rose, and brightest of all shone here it was she. It was at this moment everything became clear. She was reborn in the world of the novel, still not understanding what was happening and thinking that it was some kind of an obsession, because in her previous life, she was shy and weak-willed just like now. She was afraid of even the simplest things. Interacting with people took all her strength. So she immersed herself in reading various stories. And now she couldn't believe that she had become Nadia, the secondary heroine of the novel, and wondered why it was so, and whether it was the fact that she was reading this particular novel. Despite the fact that the novel is morally difficult to perceive, she coped only 50 times, and read this novel as many as 50 times, thinking that other people read just as much. After realizing what was happening to her, something happened to her. The fact is that in the story, Nadia in the end will be decapitated. In the meantime, since her fiancé was delayed, a guy came up to her saying that in that case he would replace him, because no matter what, this wedding should be a success. Whoever said that. In her previous life, she would have run away long ago because of something like this. However, here things are different. First, her mom and dad died in an accident, and then her title went to her uncle, and the girl was left penniless. This life contained many dangers. The capital was left behind. And since Nadia had nothing left but to marry to solve the problems, so the wedding just had to go smoothly. Now, standing in front of the altar, they were obliged to follow everything that was specified in the marriage contract. Hoping that they would find in each other support, they had to sign the document, after which the ceremony would come to an end and they would officially become husband and wife. Nadia realized that there was absolutely nothing difficult about it, but she didn't know if she could ignore all those stares at her, because she realized that she would be mocked for saying that the groom at the ceremony was replaced by someone else. That's why she decided to sign the document, knowing that it would be her last signature with such a surname, after which the groom's replacement went to put his signature, which confirmed that the bride was abandoned by her partner on the most important day. However, the door suddenly opened and a man came in saying that he was late, and after his arrival there was a metallic odor in the room because he was covered with blood, which was also left on the floor behind him. The novel Betrayal of the Black Rose is a devastating work in which new victims appear on every page. Nadia Vine's body was also affected by the plot. On the night this realization came to her, if it hadn't been for the hair, she wouldn't have suspected anything, since Nadia was a minor character, something like the villain's third girlfriend, and aside from her pink hair, there was nothing remarkable about her appearance. It turned out that even such a character was beheaded, so feeling the approach of death, she decided that it was time to leave the capital. Because it is worth a person to be in the books, he will try to change his fate, because it is literature, and there was possible everything. But she still didn't know how she could avoid the tragedy of reading this novel. But luckily for her, the story was just beginning, and to save her life, she must leave the capital before the main events unfolded, Nadia thought, as she stood pondering on the balcony. She was interrupted by a girl named Melissa, who noticed her alone and asked why the debutante was there alone, because today was her special day, and if it were her, she would have enjoyed the moment. Melissa told her that Nadia was looking for her uncle and suggested she come back. But when the girl asked for a few more minutes, Melissa left angrily thinking about how annoying the girl was. It wasn't until 3 years after her debut that Melissa heard that Nadia was getting married. But after her parents died and her father got a wild marquis, Melissa thought they would continue to live together. As soon as Nadia was about to answer, Melissa interrupted her, saying that she was not rich, and Nadia had no social skills at all, so she really should have gotten married at that age while someone was still looking at her. Nadia realized that if her parents had survived, there would have been plenty of options to escape from the capital, but she didn't understand how a poor noble lady could cope alone. That was why she decided that getting married was the best solution, although it was also a serious step, but in any case it was in many ways better than beheading. Seeing the circumstances where nieces marry and leaves the marquise, Uncle would only be happy to give her into the hands of the groom. Nadia had learned that the Baron was about her age and lived in a poor village in the east of the empire. Her uncle also said that she was already agreed to be taken with a small dowry, so she should be grateful. Melissa went on to say that Nadia's fiancé looked like a dog. He was so poor he barely deserved to be called a baron, and she didn't understand who would want to marry one. And if he was from the eastern border, he must have been incredibly boring. Melissa continued to pretend as if she was worried about Nadia, herself angry at her incredibly poor reaction and saying that the man she was going to marry was just an ugly jerk. Looking at Nadia's confused reaction, Melissa told her not to make anything up about herself and also told her that they shouldn't have spent their wedding night together the way he could barely walk. She considered him an invalid and thought that he was hardly in good health and might even die soon. And then, when Nadia was enjoying the delights of the Baroness's life, everyone might think her petty. Nadia understood that the wedding, which is organized by her uncle, will not go so well, but for her priority has always been survival. Therefore, she hurried to get married. But now, looking at the man who came out and realizing that he was covered in blood from head to toe, she didn't know how to react, because usually she fainted at the sight of blood, but now it was everywhere. She had to look at the color red, and she wanted to forget it, because of that incident. But she knew she couldn't let her emotions get the better of her. Her whole life depended on this wedding. So she tried to bring herself to her senses in every possible way. Now, looking at him, she could not understand who was standing in front of her. But when her replacement groom saw him bowed and greeted him, the girl realized that this lord was supposed to be her fiancé. She did not understand how it happened, because judging by what she had heard, he was supposed to be completely different. When the two of them stood in front of the altar, Nadia felt very strange, because they met for the first time, but he was still very familiar to her. Nadia was glad that he had come, realizing that Melissa was wrong, because the Baron was not ugly but rather handsome, and he had no hint of disability. But now, realizing that Altair Aylesford was standing in front of her, Nadia realized where she got the sudden feeling of déjà vu, because that coal-like black hair and flame-red eyes, and a mole under his left eye. A very cold, hard exterior that at the same time attracts, and his name is the most frightening character of the novel, the one who cut off Nadia's head and that crazy villain. She was sure of what she had read in the novel more than once. After a while, this man had distinguished himself on the battlefield, and received land, and became a duke. And then, like the rest of the nobility, Nadia's head was so busy with thoughts of moving from the capital that she completely forgot who was the main character of the novel, but who knew that the poor Baron will become a crazy duke. Now she realized that she had serious problems. It was like climbing into the tiger's den to avoid him. Her first life ended in a car accident, and the second would end in execution at the hands of a villain. She realized that it was terribly unfair and unjust, because all she wanted was to live normally and die of old age. However, she calmed herself by realizing that villains are not born, and since the main events had not yet begun, she needed to prevent his transformation. She looked around the room and realized that if she looked closely, everyone seemed pretty calm. Despite the fact that he had burst in the middle of the ceremony covered in blood, it seemed as if it was no surprise to anyone. Now Altair turned to the boy and told him that he was done with his business and had killed all of them, but decided to leave one to live a little longer, because he needed to talk to him. Nadia was shocked. He asked her to take care of herself and to come to her senses, because she should not have acted like a fool, as her head could fall from her shoulders at any time, so she had better not make him kill his own wife. After his words, Nadia, realizing that she was about to faint, realized that she was wrong. Even before the story began, he was still a villain. At Aylesford Castle in the eastern region of the Lupus Empire, the doctor examined Nadia, explaining that she was very tired from today's trip and that it was nothing serious. Altair had never heard of people fainting from fatigue. The doctor explained that his wife was at risk because she was very fragile and should be looked after. It could happen to anyone. The Knight of Aylesford, named Blank, who was standing next to him, asked the man to change his tone because he was talking to his wife in such a way that even the doctor was frightened and it should not be done. Well, Altair did not understand the problem because he thought that he was very polite and did not even swear. So Blank realized that he definitely had a problem if he thought so. He explained that such a tone was necessary to show who stood in front of the man, but for the lady it was too much, so Altair should be kinder. The man didn't see how he could be kinder, for he had already caught one of those who had tried to kill her. But Blank beat him to it, saying that they were the first to be hunted, and since the Lord had no heir, they were trying to harm his wife. He asked Altair not to forget the reason he had married, for he needed an heir as soon as possible. As time went on, Blank suggested that Altair should have dinner with Nadia the other day, or cook something himself to cheer her up. But first, he had to become a man before he could become a husband. Waking up the next morning, Nadia didn't realize where she was, looking around and seeing what was around. Noticing the perfect cleanliness, she assumed she was the first tenant here, and didn't know if it could have been that easy from day one. It was funny to her that hunger made itself felt even in a situation like this. But what was she thinking? Since she was hungry, she was still alive, so it was time to make sure she had a snack. She knew it was time to come to her senses and try to get things back on track. She remembered thinking that she could only survive if she escaped from the capital, but at the time, she didn't know how to do it. No one had forced her to leave, and she had wanted to marry and had agreed to marry the man her uncle had proposed. And it had been her own choice, so now was not the time to be afraid. She had to eat first, and then she would have energy to do things. And standing by the door, she hoped that they would come for her. But after standing there for a while, she realized that everything was strange, because it was time to remember about her, even if not the invitation to breakfast, if only to help with her makeup. She couldn't believe she'd been abandoned, so she assumed that the staff had found out about the wedding and might be acting like this because even the master of the house wasn't happy to see her. But that was nothing new to her, because even here no one needed her. Even remembering the moment when they had been in an accident where her parents had died and she had woken up in bed wounded and learned that her uncle would become a marquis. She tried not to blame her uncle too much, but that's how she turned from a favorite and only daughter to a rejected niece. Of course, she was ignored by all the servants. Her uncle didn't give her the right part of the inheritance. And now she does not need a wife, because on the first wedding night, the groom did not even want to approach her. Suddenly, she was interrupted by a knock at the door, and the girl jumped up from the bed, glad that she had been remembered and had finally eaten. She realized through a small crack that it was Altair, who had come in and frightened her with his ghastly appearance. However, she was surprised to see that he was holding a breakfast that had obviously been brought to her. She didn't know how to react to this and what happened, so in her head she thought that he had come to kick her out. But suddenly, he put a tray of breakfast right next to her. She was surprised at what he had brought for her, but she couldn't help it. She hadn't eaten anything for a long time, so she rushed to the table and grabbed the first thing that caught her eye. Altair looked at the girl and asked her if she was going to eat standing up, and when she sat down, he asked her to eat faster before everything got cold. Nadia subconsciously felt that he was pushing her, but she did not pay attention to it, because the food was simply unparalleled, and it was not because she was hungry, because it was really very tasty. So she decided to try the rest of the dishes, starting with the soup. Tasting it, she realized that it had a very rich taste, and ate it without stopping to think about who made it. But when she looked up, she saw Altair looking at her intently, which was rather creepy, and at the same moment she was frightened, because maybe the food was not for her after all, and how dare she eat alone while he was standing there. So she ate, and through her tears complimented the chef who had prepared such a delicious meal, and all this under Altair's creepy and indifferent gaze. After a while, Nadia realized that she had eaten everything so quickly that she felt nauseous, and yet since the plates were empty, she did not understand why Altair was still there, for he could have left long ago. The girl looked at him again and thought that he had something to say, but she asked the question aloud, for she was uncomfortable with the tense silence between them. She realized that she had asked a stupid question and apologized to him, for she did not understand why, but he was definitely furious. But Altair changed his tone a little and said that she should have prepared herself, because today all the servants living in the house had made an effort to plan a welcome dinner for his new wife. Then Altair turned around and left the room, telling her not to be late, and Nadia sighed with relief as he finally left. Nadia realized that in fact, with apologizing people, he behaved the same way as in the novel, and everything was fine except for her knees. But if she continued to apologize like that every time, they would not be happy. So sitting on the floor, she wondered if she should have gotten a bandage to reduce the damage to her knees. But then she turned sharply as the door opened, and she was afraid that Altair had come back. But suddenly, she saw the maid looking at her with a look of incomprehension, for the girl was sitting on the floor, which was strange. Nadia explained that she was checking the quality of the carpet, and explained that it would be better if they changed it for something softer and more refined. The maid at the same moment replied with joy and delight that this was indeed so, and that she thought exactly the same as Milady, and was glad that their opinions agreed. She thought that all the curtains, beds, and furniture should be renewed, and the whole castle should be restored. However, not noticing that the girl was talking, she stopped, remembering that she had forgotten to introduce herself, and explained that her name was Anna, the maid of the Alley Sport House, who would take care of her in the future. Then she began to tell Nadia about the people living in the palace, starting with the fact that she had been sent here by their butler Paul to help the girl get ready. 30 minutes later, Nadia was completely exhausted, because she had never had to talk to anyone for so long before, as she had been sitting listening to the maid's stories about each of the inhabitants and servants of the palace. Nadia looked around and realized that the Baron was really a poor man. If his wife's room looked like that, what to say about the rest of the rooms, as there was actually no decor? It was probably the only words of Melissa that turned out to be true, because her husband was definitely not rich. But since now she was there, the maid thought that she probably had a lot of ideas about beauty, and they could correct and change a lot. Nadia didn't even think about the fact that she was now the Baroness's mistress. She just wanted to escape without thinking about the consequences of her decision. Altair probably didn't marry out of boredom, but if he needs a mistress in the house, Nadia will be able to cope and won't even impose herself. With the Vine family and experiences from her past life, she hoped it would help her become smarter. But in the novel, Altair was the Duke of Bachelors. It was understandable why the lands were in such a poor state, for surely any lady would flatly refuse such a thing, so everything was unkept and looked poor, requiring restoration and change. But Altair gave himself completely to work after becoming a duke, so that no one would come near him, because Altair's wife is a very mysterious and gloomy character. That meant that Nadia's role and actions could have a lot to do with it. So she decided that when she saw Altair, she should stop being afraid and shaking, because he was her husband, and her reaction should be appropriate. She decided to leave the room, but the rope from the bell seemed to be broken, so none of the servants had come. She would have liked to meet someone else, but there was almost no light in the corridor, and she didn't understand how the castle staff navigated in this darkness. Anna really wasn't exaggerating when she said that absolutely everything in this place needed to be restored. But just along the way, she came across something black trying to touch it, but she didn't know what it was. Assuming it was probably a door, she continued to feel it, realizing it was no good. Immediately, however, she heard Altair's voice asking what exactly she was doing. The girl gradually realized that she had been touching him all this time and started to walk back into the darkness, but she tripped over something and started to fall as suddenly Altair managed to grab her, pulling her close to him. He was angry that she had come there alone because he thought she was running away. But Nadia calmly explained that it was not so, and that she was not running away because she was here of her own free will and would never run away. She realized that she had to take responsibility for her own choices, because she had taken the path that seemed to her the best in the situation, and it was time to face all the consequences. She still did not understand what Altair wanted from his wife, but in any case, she would try not to disappoint him. But she really knew more than he thought, and just waited for him to tell her what to do. Altair had already listened to her carefully and asked if she would work hard for what he wanted, and then she should stop calling him Lord and address him by his first name. Nadia wasn't so sure about that, because everyone around her treated him with respect and addressed him the same way, so she kept repeating it, because she didn't know what to call him otherwise. Altair had already interrupted her by saying that she knew more than he thought, and she should have tried to guess. Nadia assumed that he was trying to test her and hoped that she would find out what he wanted, because it was her chance. So she said that if she found the answer to this question, he would have to tell her what she should do. Altair agreed with this proposal because he realized that she herself would never guess what he wanted. Nadia did not think so, because she thought that absolutely everything is possible, and if you do not know something, you need to learn, and the answer can be found in books or close people. Altair listened to her carefully and realized that it would be quite a problem, because she wouldn't find anything at night, and she should have asked the butler tomorrow to take her around the castle. Then, grabbing her in his arms, he went straight on saying that she was so glowing that he decided to use it to light the way back, without paying attention to the girl's indignant cries. She tried with all her might to get away and asked him to let go, but Altair realized that it was very dark and she would not return to the room alone, and he, unlike her, could see everything. Nadia was sure that she would be able to walk by feel, and when Altair said that she would fall and break something, she was sure that it would not happen, because it was impossible to get a fracture because of an ordinary fall. Besides, Altair realized that she was tired, and he didn't want any mishaps in the castle, so he just asked her to be quiet. Nadia realized that common sense was not his strong suit. Though on the other hand, Altair didn't want anyone to get hurt in his castle, it was not like any villainous principles, but more like elementary care. Just then, Anna burst into her room, which frightened her because she didn't knock. However, she said that it was time for them to go to dinner, because everyone was waiting for Nadia. Then Nadia remembered Altair's words about dinner, and clearly said that if she didn't come, she would be in serious trouble. She realized that she had forgotten all about it, and if she was even a little late, the Baron would glare at her with a displeased look, and she couldn't let that happen. So she went after Anna and asked her to get ready quickly. For a while, they rushed around the room trying to find absolutely all her things, but finally Nadia realized that it would be much easier if she just went in those clothes. The knights gathered and sitting around the table for dinner were discussing the appearance of the new lady, thinking that something might be wrong with her after all. One of the knights of Aylesford named Cain knew that the estate was in the eastern part of the empire, hence the whole area was deserted and their land was very poor. And the lady of the capital had moved to this rundown east, so they all wondered why such a person had come here, because it was at least strange since such people usually lived in the capital. And lastly, their Lord Altair knew that his facial expression did not change much with every emotion, and any of the manifested feelings were not shown to him, so they expected to see a companion for their lord who could not talk or was not healthy. But the girl they saw at the wedding, to their great surprise, was not like that at all. They were very surprised at her beauty and her ability to behave and hold her own in public. Another point was that the girl did not refuse to marry the lord after his bloody appearance, after which even the knights thought that this wedding was clearly over because he shocked everyone. For all these reasons, they found her behavior and her personality insanely strange, and it seemed that something was wrong, for even all her limbs were in place. I did not try to find out what the reason was. They began to suppose that she had been sent by Balgale, but immediately abandoned the idea. For even with his many connections, he would never contact the niece of the present Marquis. They joked that they had never seen the lady faint so gracefully and beautifully, so they thought the girl might be an angel who had come down from heaven to Aylesford to pray for the land, and they realized that in that case, it would be unbelievable. Then Cain decided to sing something to welcome the angelic lady, for he had had enough to drink. Nadia, standing in front of the door to the dining room, assumed that this was how generals felt when they went to the battlefield, because she was afraid to go in there in case she did something wrong and everything went wrong. She knew that in any case, Altair was behind that door, and she was afraid that he would be angry again, because she was a little late, because she had forgotten about his warning, and she did not want to catch his judgmental glances again. But Anna, who was standing near her, looked at her indecision and offered to open the door. But Nadia pulled herself together, because she had promised herself to be decisive, and wanted from now on not to worry and not to feel fear. But no matter how she tried to calm herself, it was still scary. Even if she appeared in the same clothes as in the morning, she still did not know what to say to her and how to behave. But the moment she heard the music and the song coming from there, she was glad, because the voice apparently couldn't sing, but it lifted her spirits and reduced her fear, helping her to relax. She finally decided to open the doors to the dining room, and as soon as she got there, the eyes of everyone in the room turned to her, especially Altair. Nadia tried to control herself. She had promised herself not to be afraid. She noticed that the others had the same intimidating looks as their leader. But Altair still frightened her the most. She was afraid that he looked that way because he was angry that she was late. But Anna grabbed her hand and took her to the table because it was already dinner time. Anna sat down near Altair and was sure that they would be reprimanded for being late, but she was surprised because right in front of her on the table was a traditional Oriental dish that was prepared especially for her: chicken in tomato sauce with many spices. Nadia realized that Altair was not very angry and assumed that it was a residual phenomenon after she had promised to work on his desire. Nadia looked at the plate in front of her and saw that there was a whole chicken and wondered how she should eat it. But looking around, she noticed that everyone was eating with their hands and assumed that it was probably tastier. She was upset because she also wanted to eat like them, but she realized that the rules of etiquette and her status would not allow it, which made her sad. Suddenly, Altair took away her plate, to which Nadia was very surprised because she had not even started to eat yet. She was afraid that he would really take away the dish because of simple tardiness. But when the man handed her the plate back with the already sliced chicken, she was surprised, not realizing what had just happened. Did he help her? Because she couldn't cut the chicken properly, for she didn't fit his behavior at all. But she forgot about these thoughts because the taste of the chicken was amazing and even better than breakfast. As if cooked by a chef from a 5-star hotel, Nadia realized that everything becomes more beautiful if there is delicious food. And then she noticed Altair's displeased look directed at her again, not understanding what was going on, whether it meant that he wanted her to eat every last spoonful as in the morning, when her husband told her not to eat the chicken alone, but to eat the stew as well, and then, if she wanted to ask the maid for more, Nadia realized that he wanted her to be full and burst, and that was his evil deed. Cain came up to her and, smiling brightly, told her that it was an honor to meet her, and Nadia knew from his voice that he was the one singing. Cain was a little confused at what she had heard, as the man's singing could be heard even outside, and explained that he wouldn't have done that around the lady, but he didn't know she was there. Nadia calmed him down and explained that there was nothing wrong with it, because he sang very well, and it was thanks to him that she was able to relax and find the strength to finally come to them. Cain was embarrassed by her compliment and said that it wasn't like that, because he was much better at creating a pleasant atmosphere in the company than at singing, after which a dialogue ensued. The knight decided to offer her a beer, glad that he had brought some with him, because he had to go through a lot to be first in line for alcohol. When he saw Nadia's surprised reaction, he explained that he had fought with everyone to get it, so she shouldn't forget that he was the first one there. Cain suddenly stopped talking and his expression changed, and when Nadia turned around, she saw Altair's stare directed at them, which was cruel and frightening. Cain started to justify himself because it wasn't his fault that the Lord had missed the opportunity to be first because of his indecision, but he was silent, realizing that he shouldn't have said that. Cain didn't think it was okay to use Auror for something like this, but the Baron thought he could use him when he wanted to. Elena looked at their altercation and realized that she was seeing the ball for the first time and didn't understand what it was. Aurora is a materialized energy that is used as a projectile. Auroras can only be used by people who have reached the level of Swordmaster. But even Nadia had heard that such were insanely few, but was not surprised, because it was to be expected from a strong villain, and thought that it would be better to direct his energy in the right direction. Altair then told Cain to stop making noise and get out, unless he wanted him to do some special training with him. As a reaction to his words, Cain immediately turned around and started to leave, realizing that perhaps the Lord already loved his wife more than he thought, but didn't show it. The special training was actually a common anger venting code name that was used quite often if someone did something stupid. It was a shame for Cain that he'd been told off in front of the lady, and it was all the fault of a glass of beer because she probably wasn't very thirsty. But he still didn't know if it would have been better to tell him directly so that it wouldn't have been such an awkward situation. When Nadia and Altair were alone after Cain had left, there was an awkward silence and tension between them. Nadia assumed that he probably hated her eating in comfort, not realizing if they would ever have an adequate conversation or if she would be talking to herself. thinking about what she should do. She suddenly realized that she wanted to sleep, as she was getting intoxicated very quickly since she had been silent all this time. She should have gone to get some fresh air. But looking at Altair, she realized that his presence would keep her company, but she thanked Cain mentally, for she was relieved only for a moment. She was upset, because it was disgusting to live in a place where no one was welcome, but she was angry, not understanding why she should just accept it, because she was a valuable person who had a right to a good life and comfort. Immediately, she jumped up sharply from the table, realizing that she needed to clear everything once and for all, and since she was drunk now, she had nothing to fear, because in such a state, she could say and do anything without feeling fear. But when she got up and gathered her thoughts, she realized that her body was not moving. And suddenly she felt Altair beside her, who was holding her hands and calming her down, because he also realized that she was very drunk. Nadia tried to convince him that she was absolutely fine, and he was the one who was drunk. But Altair calmed her down by holding her close to him. Suddenly, Nadia began to apologize, pulling away from him, because she had accidentally touched his body and did not want to repeat the recent situation. The Baron looked at her uncomprehendingly and asked why she was always apologizing when she met him. Nadia started to promise that she would expand her vocabulary and was very excited because she was too drunk. Altair was already looking at her, not understanding what she was doing and what was going on, and then he just picked her up in his arms, realizing that it would be much easier and safer that way. In response to the girl's angry indignation, he looked at her carefully, saying that it was better to do that than to stumble and catch her at every step, for she was not even standing normally on her feet. When Nadia looked at him, you could not believe your eyes, because it was obvious that he was embarrassed. But it could not be, because villains never embarrassed by holding a girl in his arms. So she began to convince herself that it was the effect of the alcohol, for she herself was a little dizzy, and the whole problem was the beer, promising herself that she would not drink another drop. Altair had already brought her into the room and looked at her carefully, realizing that she was trembling every time she looked into his eyes. But because of the alcohol, she was becoming very brave, and she was sleeping soundly next to him. Even though they were the same age but insanely different, and her body looked fragile as if made of crystal. She was the daughter of a wealthy man who had once held a high position. He realized that he would forever be a mercenary who was not destined to look like an aristocrat, and there was nothing he could do about it. It was logical that the weak capital girl was so afraid of him, for he knew the effect he had on others, especially on delicate and fragile girls. One of the knights with Anna on his back came into the room, explaining that the maid was so drunk that she would hardly be able to serve the lady, as she could use some sleep. So he asked Altair to take care of the lady's clothes, which confused him very much, for it was a shock to him that he had to undress Nadia, even though he was her husband. When there was no action from Altair, the knight offered to do it himself, seeing the angry reaction and explaining that that was why he had asked the Lord to do it, because he was her husband and had the right to do it. Then went on to say that their first wedding night had been postponed because his wife had fainted, but was he planning on sleeping with her at all, or would he just stare forever? Altair explained that she freaks out every time he sees her, and he didn't understand how this was the way to even get an heir, but was glad she passed out again, though a little angry. The knight, however, knew that Altair absolutely did not realize that he had to make an effort and go out of his way to get rid of his fear, and asked who had advised him and the faces for the blood wedding, explaining that they are beautiful girls, and it is not strange that she was very surprised in such appearance, so she cannot relax until now, and feeling fear in front of him, because every time she remembered his appearance. The Baron said that it was immediately obvious that he and Blanc were brothers and resembled each other. Altair said that the matter was not only in appearance, because the guys still talked the same. All their difference was only in the glasses. And yet he inevitably appeared at the wedding in such a form, because everyone knew that then the enemies were in the first place. Then Altair inquired about the guy they had left alive, because he should have opened his mouth by now and learned that the man was responsible for everything, and that he was sure that Nadia, his wife, was his target. Because Balgail was a bad man, he would continue to pursue Nadia as the easiest target, since she was the easiest to get to, and in no way could she defend herself or fight back, and he knew it. But looking at his sleeping wife, he realized that this girl would be trembling again if she knew what was going on around her. When the night left, Altair was madly glad, because at last he would not have to listen to these conversations. But he did not understand whether he really should change his wife in such a situation, because it embarrassed him. When Nadia woke up in the morning, she was dizzy, and she could not remember anything that had happened yesterday, especially how she had gotten back to the room. She thought about it, realizing that her instincts had never failed her in her previous life. And then she noticed that her dress was untied and was surprised, for she didn't even know how to take it off. So she supposed that perhaps she had tried to untie it last night, but had failed, for she was very sleepy. Just then, Anna came into the room with a tray of water, which she had brought because she thought she would need it in the morning. Nadia noticed that she didn't look well and should have asked someone to take her place, but it would have been strange if it had been Paul's responsibility to take care of Nadia. After all, he could do it, but Paul was a man, which Nadia was surprised at. Why would she talk about a butler if she could ask another maid to help her? Anna looked at her in surprise because she thought that she was the only one working as a maid, because there were only 3 workers in their castle: Paul the butler, the cook, and she the maid. Nadia was madly surprised because it was such a huge castle and so few servants that it was ridiculous not understanding who takes care of the Lord, and asked if anyone helped Anna. But as it turned out, it was not difficult for her to cope alone, and mostly she performs all the duties around the house, sometimes asking for help from Paul. Having analyzed this information, Nadia asked what happens if she comes to visit, but she explained that in their castle there are almost no guests, but in case of what happens, Paul takes care of them. Nadia was surprised, because it seemed that butlers usually took care of the financial affairs of the house, and in this case, it seemed that all the household duties lay on Anna alone. And now it finally became clear to her what was going on here, realizing that Altair was doing something unthinkable to her and to the other servants of the castle, because it was cruel. As it turned out, Alsford was poorer than she had expected, and things were bad. But she hoped that she was wrong again, and the situation was better. When Anna suggested that she call Paul, who knew all the details, Nadia wondered, realizing that he was the butler's only servant and bookkeeper. Nadia immediately remembered her mother, who said that in order to quickly get used to a new place, it is better to get close to the servants from the beginning. Since Nadia realized that now she was the mistress of the house, she needed to get to know her mercenaries better, because only then the work will be more pleasant, and there will be an understanding of what is happening. So she told Anna that she would like to meet the butler as soon as possible, but first she had to take a bath, because she could not meet people like this. She rushed to quickly prepare everything she needed. Lying in the bathtub, Nadia felt the fatigue leaving her body, because she could not imagine that Anna would try so hard. But at the moment when Nadia was about to get out, she noticed that there was no towel on the usual place, not understanding why Anna had forgotten about the towel and did not know what to do now. She had absolutely nothing to wipe herself with, and the water was getting colder and colder. And then she heard that someone had just opened the door, hoping that it was Anna who remembered her. She rushed out of the bathtub to meet Anna, but as it turned out, Altair was there, who closed the door very sharply at that very moment. Nadia realized the situation. Nadia instantly rushed through the nearby door, realizing that she had just appeared completely naked in front of his Altair, and if she hadn't wiped herself off, she should have at least dressed in order to go back out. The knight standing outside the door went inside to ask Altair if he had imagined it, or if the lady had really just screamed, worried that something had happened to her. But when he saw Altair, he wondered why he was acting so strangely. And then the Baron closed the door sharply again, kicking him out of there and hitting blank once more with the door. Altair stood alone and pondered why he stood there like a statue without making a single movement or even turning away, for which he was somewhat ashamed. Nadia realized that it was her room. That's why she thought that no one would go in there, and said that if Altair would warn her in the future, such situations would not happen again. Altair didn't understand why he had to be so nonsensical and warn her when he was coming in, if he just wanted to see her, because this room also belonged to him. Looking at Nadia's incomprehensible look, he asked why their shared bedroom had become her private one, because it belonged to both of them, and it was normal for a couple to share the same bedding. Nadia explained that she had not heard anything like that, because in the capital, nobles slept with their spouses only when absolutely necessary, so it was a shock to her. After all, if such things happened every day, everyone around would reproach couples for their indecent behavior. She explained that since her parents were noble, they slept in separate rooms. But Aether didn't understand why suddenly he had to follow these rules if it could be different. But noticing that the girl was shivering a little from the cold, he threw his coat over her very sharply, leaving the room and slamming the door, which Nadia did not understand because she did not know the reason why he was so angry. For Altair, however, it was simply madness, for she looked very innocent and light, and he could hardly resist the odor. When he met one of his knights in the corridor, he noticed that so many strange things were happening today and asked if Altair was all right, as he was standing in the middle of the corridor as if he was not himself. He was also carrying a pile of papers, the bills for the last 3 years, which he was going to take to the lady, for she would soon have to take charge of them. Altair looked at him carefully and said that if she didn't know how to work with it, it was all right. If she needed help, he would take care of it. But the guy was sure that the lady was from a very prestigious family and had experience in working with such cases. So it was time for him to finally meet with his wife and talk about it. Altair was immediately angry because he realized that the knight was going to enter the room as no one dared to see her as she appeared before him. So he stopped the guy and told him that it was impossible for him to see his wife now. He could go in an hour or two, but not before. Now he asked him to clean his room so that Altair could sleep. Even the knight didn't understand and asked him what was going on, and Altair increased the time and now told him about 5 hours. When Anna came into the room informing him that her food was ready, she was surprised. Why was Nadia wearing a cape in this heat? She explained that she had not prepared a towel for her, for which the maid apologized, for she had forgotten all about it. And then Nadia asked if she should share a room with her husband. Anna answered without thinking that it should be like that, because they were a couple, and without it she was surprised that it was different in the capital. Since Altair had not come for a few days, Nadia thought that it was her private room. She explained that for the first couple of days, Nadia had been feeling ill, and that she had not come last night, so he wanted to give her a rest, and they were to start sleeping together from today. Hearing this, Nadia was just amazed to realize that her regime is just terrible, and Altair will say that she is just interfering despite her formidable look, and God forbid will send her to sleep on the floor. And she was afraid that he didn't even yell at her, but she looked around and saw that there was a couch, so at least she wouldn't have to sleep on the floor if he decided to kick her off the bed. Anna looked at the couch and wondered if there was something wrong with it. The butler should have been here by now, but told her the strange thing that he had to wait 5 hours before he could visit Nadia. Anna didn't understand what it meant at all, but said that he probably said it without thinking and shouldn't have paid attention to him, and it was better to go to lunch, because their chief had prepared it with a soul especially for her. When time and glass, Paul came after 5 hours, as she said, greeted and introduced himself. Looking at him, Nadia had a hunch that it would be very hard to get close to him, but he looked quite unusual. And noticing her surprise, Pavel explained that the form was his younger brother. Nadia didn't immediately realize that he was talking about the man who was substituting for Altair, and was very surprised at their resemblance. Then Paul said that she could call him by his name, as a thief does, and explained that first of all he had brought her the accounts of the castle for the last 3 years, because he thought that it would be curious to know in what state the place was now. He also brought the keys to the storehouse, though it was empty, and explained that the Aylesford lands were not in the most favorable area, and it was enough to look around to see that there was not such a rich harvest, and they had to use additional sources of income. It was magical hunting. Goblins and griffins come down from the Dragon Mountain and blockade the western part of the empire if they appear near their lands, and their knights do the job. Their job was not much different from that of mercenaries, and Nadia couldn't believe that the knights were getting paid for it. The warriors from the capital were very surprised to see that the situation here was no less horrifying. So she concluded that there were no regular sources of income and skill, because magical creatures could not appear on a regular schedule either. Pavel, after listening to her conclusions, confirmed and explained that that was why everything was bad here, and suggested that she take a walk in order to explore everything herself, instead of hearing about it many times from his mouth. Nadia agreed, but said that at the moment she was more interested in documents, and in the castle she would look later. Since she had married a man unknown to her and lived in a strange place, she wanted to know everything about this place and people. That's why she wanted to try to do her best and hoped that Paul would help her in this so that the work would be fruitful. But she was surprised by his reaction because he just kept silent and thought that she shouldn't have talked about it. But Paul smiled and assured her that their work would be fruitful and asked her to take care of them, the estate and the Lord. He also promised that he would do his best to keep the girls' enthusiasm alive, so he had to start by studying the material. Nadia did not notice how the whole day passed, and only in the evening looked out the window and noticed that the sun had already set and so much time had passed. She was so eagerly absorbed in the statistics that she didn't even notice how much time had passed, realizing that she had overworked herself a bit, but she was glad anyway because she had learned a lot of useful and valuable information about the estate and the things that were going on here. She looked around and noticed Altair's clothes hanging in the closet, remembering Anna's words that he would be sleeping with her tonight, and she couldn't believe it. She began to reassure herself, because it was to be expected from the moment she decided to get married, as it was natural for everyone to spend the night with her husband. Even though her husband looked cruel and impenetrable, the only problem was that he was Altair. But she told herself at first that now was the right time. It was not such a big problem. The next morning, Anna woke up in bed alone again, which she was very surprised about, because he never showed up in the bedroom last night. He was not there the next day or 2 days later. She slept alone as on the first day of her stay in the castle. When she went to bed a few days later, she knew it would be the same. Even though she was prepared for anything, she still felt a slight tension. She remembered what Melissa had said about him being very sick and not being able to do it, assuming it was true, and didn't know if she should have gotten married at all. The next morning, Paul said that today he would give her a tour of the castle as they had agreed. They would spend this time with maximum benefit and manage very quickly because he had found a wonderful route. First, they walked through the castle, and Nadia realized that the situation was much more serious than she had thought, realizing how much work she would have to do, since everything was in a bad state. The budget was very small, and in the end it all came down to a lack of funds, so they could not fix absolutely all the problems because it required funds. And immediately thought about, what ways could we earn something as deserted territory? Because you need at least some permanent source of income instead of hunting monsters, as it will not bring too much money. At the same time, Paul led her to the place where their knights lived, and there was also a training ground that she wanted to look at. Nadia looked at the training ground and noticed Altair there, and even though she didn't know much about fencing, she felt as if he was unrivaled in this field. Then she looked at Paul and asked him if he knew where he had been sleeping for the last few days, because he was surprised that he hadn't been in the room for a couple of days. That's why she was worried. Then Paul looked out of the window and spoke to the Lord, remembering that the other day he had asked him to clean one of the rooms and assumed that that was where he was sleeping. Altair was already trying to change the topic of conversation and did not understand why Paul did not care where he slept. But when the butler replied that he did not care, but his wife was interested in it, Altair noticed Nadia standing next to him. Nadia intercepted his gaze and assumed that he was angry because he was looking at her again very intimidatingly and realized that he was avoiding her on purpose. But she tried not to think bad thoughts because she thought that he just didn't want to make her uncomfortable because the news about the room together frightened her. Nadia, even more upset, suggested that he probably just didn't care about her and was tired of her stupid behavior and actions. That's why he behaved that way and didn't want to spend time with her and sleep in the same bed with her. Pavel tried to calm her down by saying that there was absolutely no reason to worry, and Anna said that it was all because she had made a mistake, because she had come out of the bath naked without even thinking about the fact that now she would be in the room not alone, for which I was still ashamed. But looking at Paul's reaction, she realized that she had really messed up, because she couldn't believe that someone so calm could react so violently. She remembered that she had been taught that every noble man wanted to marry a pure, innocent girl. And now, looking back at the situation, she realized that she had been walking around their room without clothes, and such a thing could not please her husband, realizing that it was all her fault. And instead of running away from the situation and needing to take care of it herself, so she rushed over there, hoping that he was still on the training ground. If she hurried, she would catch him there. When she saw him, she started to walk down the steps very fast, but at some point she tripped and started to fall, thinking that her life was going to end quickly, but she was surprised why she fell, and it was so soft. Altair told her to get up quickly and stop lying on him, and wondered if she was in such a hurry to say something to him. holding her close to him. Nadia noticed his angry look, realizing it was her fault because she didn't see anything strange, and immediately dumbfounded him by saying she should leave, which she did. Altair didn't understand what she meant. She explained to you that since she had made a mistake, it would be better if she left, and that room belonged to him anyway. She understood that he had left the bedroom because of her, and he didn't need to make himself uncomfortable by sleeping in other rooms. But Altair didn't understand what mistake she was talking about. Nadia explained that that day she had taken off her clothes and walked immodestly around the room after the incident. He never appeared in the rest, and then he didn't want to see her on the training ground. Altair explained that the reason why he was sleeping in the other room was that he might not be able to contain himself and the inevitable would happen. But if you think about it that way, it was Nadia's fault, because she was the reason why he had such thoughts. So he explained that in general, he did not do so because of her mistake, and from now on, she should not judge by other people's opinion and behavior whether she did well or not, because then absolutely nothing terrible happened. Nadia was surprised that Altair was so open to her, even though she thought it was a dream. When she sneezed, the guy, frightened and assumed she was sick, sent her to her room and said he would call a doctor. Nadia tried to explain that she sneezed because she was worried and her health was fine, whereupon the Baron noticed that she was full of surprises. They noticed Paul standing on the steps, and Altair asked her to warn him about such outings, as he had not expected to see him there. Nadia bewilderedly agreed and said that she would ask for permission to walk around the neighborhood, but the man did not say to ask for permission, and Nadia stared at him uncomprehendingly, for she did not know what he meant by that. Then Paul said that he would take Nadia to a place she had never seen before, telling her where they were going. Meanwhile, Blank had arrived, and Altair was talking to him about something important, so Nadia decided to walk carefully so as not to distract them, telling Paul to be quiet. Blank did not understand anything, because he had heard Altair's words that he was sleeping somewhere else in order not to make a mistake, and asked him to finally make that mistake, because that was the reason he had married, because he needed heirs. Altair answered that there was no law that forced marriage, and no matter how long he held back, he did not want to force her, and they should talk about more important things. Blank agreed with everything he said, but said that he should have tried harder. He should have been like a male peacock that attracts the attention of a female. Altair explained that every time he opens his mouth and says something terrible, and he didn't know what to do, because he doesn't know what Nadia might think. To be honest, he was a bit scared. Blank, on the other hand, would advise him to be a little friendlier and gentler and smile brightly, because it wasn't that hard, and showed him by example how to do it. He explained that he would not just smile at a dark man like the Baron, and that women liked that. And Altair realized it himself, because Blank was definitely popular with women, so his advice was worth taking into account. Blank began to explain to him how to smile properly, and although Altair refused at first, but remembering Nadia's reaction, he realized that perhaps the expression on his face was really so frightening, so he tried to smile, which frightened Blank. Blank realized that he shouldn't say that, but said that it was very scary, and didn't understand why Altair looked even more frightening when he smiled and asked him never to do that in front of his wife. He would now in turn pretend he hadn't seen it. Blank then spoke to the rest of the knights, for he was sure that everyone had seen it today, and the future of Alsford was in jeopardy, and for the sake of their land and their lord, they should have united. If this continues, the lord will not even be able to kiss her, let alone a child, and they will be lucky if they kiss because they can hardly hold hands. Then, the form said that the meeting devoted to solving birth problems could be considered open, and today, on the agenda, they would think about how they could bring the Lord and Milady closer together. Paul, who was watching this, didn't understand why he was in such a stupid position, because he got under the crush, because his brother was the stupidest, and came up with this idea, which most likely won't work. One of the knights had the idea to tell about how their lord was good, because they say even a mystical goblin can be summoned by the three of them, and they will succeed. Nadia will look at him from the other side if she knows something good about him. Another idea was to get them drunk and leave them in the same room, because everyone thought that something would happen there, but some thought that the lord would not even get drunk. The third most attractive knight according to the ladies of the manor, although for some it was strange that he was in third place, intervened in the conversation. He asked if they knew the easiest way to make anyone fall in love with him, but the knights were outraged that they would do it if they knew. So they asked him to stop bragging and get to the point. Cain explained that it was necessary to help them in a difficult situation. When it was hard for them, when girls were tired, guys could be the only lifeline and instantly win their hearts. After all, girls appreciate strength and support. This meant that Altair should help Nadia when she had difficulties, and although it was a good idea, Paul doubted that Altair would agree to deliberately embarrass the lady in order to help her. After all, he had even given up his bedroom when his wife took it, in which case they had decided to take action without the Lord's knowledge, and the operation would have to be secret. Nadia was admiring the beautiful Cravids, and realized that Anna was right, because the walk in the fresh air had lifted her spirits. Nadia was thinking about how to get Altair's favor and could not think about anything else. Anna noticed that Nadia had been reading a lot of books lately and suggested that she rest and take a walk, although Nadia refused at first, but now she realized that all her worries had disappeared. Nadia did not notice how Anna got into the boat, saying that she would row, and Nadia only had to enjoy the scenery, and the closer they were to the mountains, the more beautiful the view. Floating down the river and looking around, Nadia realized that up close the mountain slope looked much prettier than she had imagined and heard from others. Altair was rich in the novel because he had explored a mine with magical stones located in this area, and in particular the return stone is the only stone that allows you to charge magical items. It is a very rare and expensive artifact. Altair, who discovered the mine, became the owner of untold riches, and even nobles born with golden spoons in their mouths would envy such a thing. It would be a shame if, under the circumstances, he discovered the place on his own, and she knew that if she helped him discover the mine, he would appreciate the gesture, for she was now the Baroness of Aylesford. Nadia knew that he would not hurt her, but rather protect her after such a thing. As long as she performed her role well, she would be safe. But immediately she was distracted from her thoughts because of Anna's scream, who explained that she suddenly felt weak in her hand and accidentally let go of the oar, and now did not know what to do. And it would be wonderful if a fearless knight appeared who could save them. But Nadia calmly said that she could swim, and it was not a problem for her to get the oar, because at the moment she was more worried about Anna's moral condition, so she dived into the water, which the maid did not expect. Nadia realized that she had to hurry and get the oar before Anna got worse, but suddenly her body became heavy, and there was a strange feeling as if she were being pulled to the bottom. At the same time on the shore were the knights with Altair, who seemed to be playing a circus, talking about the fact that there was a group of goblins, which the Baron did not believe. So he asked them to stop making a fool of him and to tell him why they had lured him there. And when they didn't answer, Altair wondered if the training was too easy for them, and he would make it harder without the show. So he said that since he appreciated it, he would train with both of them. The boys knew that this meant a one-sided attack, and were scared out of their wits because they knew that neither of them would win. That's why Altair said that the first one who confesses will be released from the fight, and asked who is waiting for us first, he said. And then the guys started to fight with each other, throwing wine on each other. Altair already realized that it seems that they were again thinking about something nonsense. If he now leaves there, then no, so will not leave. But immediately heard the screams of the maid, saw his wife drowning in the water. The knights turned in the direction of the screams, did not understand why everything turned out this way, because according to their plan, after Anna dropped the oars, they had to wait for Altair, who would get it and thus save them by winning the love of Nadia, because they did not understand why the lady was drowning. But it did not matter now, for they had to hurry and save her from the water, which Altair did by throwing himself into the water and taking his wife out of it. The man pulled her to the shore, and seeing her condition began to ask the knights to go and get a doctor, but Cain looked at him carefully and said that it seemed to him that the lady was not breathing, and there was no breath. But Altair could not let it end like that. So he lowered himself down and began to perform artificial respiration, asking her to open her eyes, and his request was heard. That is, at the same moment the girl opened her eyes and began to cough. Though she was still breathing, but her body was still ice cold, the man was afraid if something like that would happen again. But he realized that now the situation was different, and whatever happened, he would protect her at any cost. Nadia, a little coming to herself, did not understand why it was so stuffy, because just now she was freezing, and now he would be unbearably hot. I wanted to take off the blanket, But as soon as she was about to do it, Altair intercepted her hand and said that according to the healer, she needed to warm up. Nadia couldn't understand whose voice was that familiar voice. She had a headache and couldn't remember anything, thinking that the man was very cruel and she was sick and very hot and delirious from the cold. Altair already realized that she had to take medicine in order to come to her senses and raise her body temperature, and at this rate, he would soon go crazy, because Nadia was unconscious, and he continued to talk to himself and bet that after waking up, she would not remember anything. Going out into the corridor, Altair looked at the knights who had already received their punishment, but he himself did not understand it what an idiot should be to make them do such nonsense instead of physical training, because it all happened because of him. He was distracted from his thoughts by Paul, who had come to inform him that an intrusive guest had arrived and that only one person could show up unannounced, Lord Balgale himself. Altair laughed at this, for he had sent assassins here first, and now he had decided to check the situation himself. Balgale looked around the living room and didn't understand how it could be called an aristocrat's living room, for it looked pitiful, as did everything he had seen before, and he realized that everything would have to be redecorated. When Altair came into the parlor, he said that if Balgale had come to argue and quarrel, he might as well go back or get to the point, for he, unlike the others, had his own concerns and business to attend to. The man was indignant, for he was his uncle, and Altair was obliged to behave with dignity, not rudeness. Altair looked at him carefully and asked who else was being rude, for he was the master of Alsford, and Balgale was supposed to treat him with respect. If his nephew was so right, then why did he not invite any of his relatives to the wedding, but chose his bride himself, although such decisions should be made by the whole family? Altair looked at him angrily and wondered if it should have been discussed by his so-called family members, and if they were really close to him, they would not have tried to take away the rest of his land and other property after he lost his parents 10 years ago, and looking at the reaction of Balgale realized that he did not even have the right words, because he did not know what to say to him, but only coughed. After all, one of those who were so desperate to take the family's lands and assets was his father. They had taken everything they could from Altair after that fire. The castle was on fire. People were drawing water from the lake to put out the fire, and the day the 12-year-old boy lost his parents, and he remembered it like it was yesterday. He had developed a talent for swordsmanship at an early age and had made a name for himself in the East. But on that day, facing the fire that had taken his parents, he had been unable to do anything about it, and all that awaited him on his doorstep was the hard life of a baron filled with helplessness and sadness, with no comfort or peace. Each of his relatives told him that his dead father owed him a debt, and it was hard for everyone if he could not repay it with money he had to give up his holdings. These relatives called him by name and played friendship, but in reality they cleverly took the last of his money. When he finally came to his senses after his sorrow, he realized that he was left with nothing, and after that, he broke all ties with his named relatives. But one of them sitting in front of him didn't have enough land taken away and wanted to take the title away. If he did not have an heir, then the impudent Balgale would inherit the throne. The man in front of him was angry, for he had spread rumors that Altair was a poor eunuch to prevent him from marrying, and did not understand why a girl from the Marquis's family was so eager to become his wife, and the one who had ruined his plans was worth getting rid of. Whereupon Balgale answered that since Altair was now married, there was nothing to be done, and inquired if he was going to show his bride and tell him about her. But Altair only wondered what his uncle was thinking, and so he said he would never see his wife and should have gotten out of there. Balgale indignantly rushed over to him, placing an envelope on the table and telling him that the Eastern Union of Nobles had sent an invitation in honor of his wedding, and that since the hunting season was coming up, they could go out together for some airing and he was here to deliver it. Altair looked at the invitation and said that in that case the man could leave. Balgale didn't understand how he could refuse like that, because most likely his nephew didn't know that his capital wife was used to different kinds of activities, and marriage with a man, especially one who was outside the city, must be incredibly boring, and he felt sorry for the girl because she couldn't get anywhere out of her withdrawn husband. Altair realized that about the events might have actually been true, but he couldn't imagine his wife having a long giggle when meeting people. Looking at his reaction, his uncle realized that it really worked, and even though he didn't know what kind of woman she was. If she decided to marry someone who was called a castrated poor man, he had to invite her to a public place and make fun of the couple in front of everyone. He thought his nephew had noticed he'd sent it, but he couldn't find any direct evidence. When Nadia finally woke up, Anna was overjoyed and said that she had slept all day because, according to the healer, when she went into the water, she had already had a cold, and that was why her body was under serious stress, and wondered why Nadia had jumped into the river in the first place, because she should have left the paddle behind. Nadia explained that it was because Anna was frightened, and since Nadia could swim, it seemed to her that she could easily get it, from which Anna felt sorry and said that it did not matter whether she was frightened or not, because her safety was much more important than hers, and asked her not to do that. Nadia did not understand this, because she said that all lives are equally important. No matter how strong the class system is, you can't judge the value of a person's life. So if such a situation happens again, she will dive for a paddle without a second thought. And it will be nice if next time she does not get sick. Then Anna, crying, rushed to her and said that from now on she would always be on her side. If the others offered to cooperate, she would refuse and would never listen to those fools again, starting to explain that it was they who had told her to bring my lady to the lake. And in general, she did it because Cain and Blank asked. Of course, they didn't want to harm, but just hoped that the relationship between my lord and lady and improve, because he saved her as soon as he knew that she was in danger and jumped into the lake without a second thought. Nadia, trying to remember, realized that someone had pulled her out of the water before she lost consciousness. It was her husband. The moment she was in his arms, she was strangely relieved, but in general, she did not remember anything in her head, were only vague fragments of memories and nothing more. Nadia only worried about whether Altair was healthy, because the water in the lake was cold. But Anna said that the Lord had never known sickness all his life, and that he would remain healthy even if the whole world caught a disease, and that he had never been sick in his life. Nadia finally left the room and remembered Anna's words that the Lord had never known illness and didn't know if such people existed at all. Besides, the water was really ice cold. Then she assumed that in order to earn respect, Altair pretended to be fresh and healthy and was worried that he was, so she decided to go and check on him. However, she met knights kneeling in the hallway with their hands up, who were being punished for putting a lady in danger and really thinking they were in big trouble. But Nadia didn't understand why they were apologizing to me. After all, she herself had jumped in, and it was a pity that she had made them worry. Therefore, it was necessary for me to apologize to her. Nadia realized that these two they were worried. They were panicking, but it was strangely sweet. There were also many knights in the family of Marquis Vine, but it seems to her that compared to them and the knights of Aylesford are much friendlier. That is why they do not care so much. When the boys were arguing among themselves, thinking that Nadia should call a doctor as she was a bit wobbly, Altair appeared in the corridor and was surprised that Nadia was in the corridor, because she was not allowed to leave the bedroom as she needed more rest. However, the girl just wanted to clarify something and explained that she was worried if he was all right, because she was also sick because of the icy water, and she wanted to say thank you. When Altair said that he was not sick because of such trifles, Nadia looked at him and realized that his complexion was really normal. She was glad that they were hurt because of her, so she said that when she had clarified, it was time to go back.